Hi there, and welcome back to another episode of A Blessing in Divorce. My name is Elizabeth, and I am the host of this podcast. Today, I want to talk about self-love. Yes, and I'm smiling a little as I say that because it's one of those phrases that sound really nice, but if I asked you what it actually looks like in your life right now, I'm not sure most women would know how to answer that. This is something that comes up in my Facebook group all the time. And generally, when someone says, you need to practice self love, or if I'm the one saying it, the pushback I'll get is, I don't know what that is, or I don't have time for that, or I don't have the money for that, any number of things. The other problem, I should say, is that we've been given this kind of specific version of what self love is. And it kind of sounds like or looks like bubble baths and having a glass of wine with friends and going for a manicure or a spa day, maybe having a massage. And don't get me wrong, those things are lovely and beautiful and they can feel very supportive, but they're not the full picture. And for a lot of women, especially the women that I work with, women who are going through a very difficult time right now, that version of self love feels either out of reach, not doable at this time, or honestly, a little bit empty. So let's talk about it. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of A Blessing in Divorce. I am so grateful to be allowed into your headset and day today. My name is Elizabeth, and I'm the host of this podcast and the owner and founder of the Separation Club, which is the club you never wanted to be part of, but the best club to be in if you're going through separation and divorce. Here we talk about how to heal, move forward, and find love if you're so inclined. Also, motherhood through divorce, finding yourself, and creating the life you deserve. Our tools are community, sisterhood, honesty, vulnerability, spirituality, and coaching. And that's when we aren't talking to our experts. I'm also a divorced mother of 4 adult sons, remarried, and a stepmom to 3. So we will be talking about everything that goes with all of that here. If you are recently separated, thinking of separating, divorcing, or even beyond your divorce, but still feeling it, then this is the podcast for you. Welcome back. So today we're talking about self-care. And there tends to be a bit of a disconnect because here's what I often see happening. You are in the middle of making maybe some really hard decisions. You're navigating huge emotional shifts and you're rebuilding your life in ways you never expected to have to do. And it's really hard. And at the same time, you might be wondering, am I doing this right? Why doesn't this feel like self-love? Shouldn't I feel better than I do? We have a lot of questions when we go through something like separation and divorce. So I ask you this. What if self-love doesn't always feel good? And what if it sometimes feels really hard? Many of my coaching clients will say things to me like, what if I just don't know how to do that? What if that's something that I'm just not able to do? So let's start by talking about what self-love actually is. Self-love is not just how you treat yourself when things are calm and easy. And no, it is not necessarily just about getting together with friends and having a glass of wine and having a big venting session, though that can be nice. It's more about how you show up for yourself when things are hard. It's about telling yourself the truth, making decisions that truly honor your values and what you want for yourself. It's about doing that without feeling selfish. It's about choosing yourself even when it disappoints someone else. Sometimes it looks like boundaries. Sometimes it looks like having really hard conversations with people. Sometimes it looks like just walking away from something or someone. Sometimes it's saying no when everybody's expecting you to say yes, even if it means that people are going to be really upset with you. And sometimes it looks like sitting alone on your couch on a Friday night, feeling everything, all the tears falling, and sitting with it, and not running away from it. Connecting with pain so that we can heal it. If you are going through a separation right now, maybe you've already left, Maybe the other person left. This wasn't your choice. Either way, I want you to hear this very clearly. Leaving or ending a relationship that wasn't right for you, even if it is very complicated, even if it's very painful, that is self-love. And if you have been left, accepting that the relationship is over, accepting that this is your new reality, that is also self-love. Continuing to pursue something that is not good for you, to continue to pursue someone who no longer wants you because they've said so, that is the opposite of self-love. Thinking that that is what you should be doing because that is what you think you want, also not self-love. It cannot ever be the loving thing to do for yourself to reach for someone who does not love you, who does not treat you well. Wanting peace is self-love. Not wanting to fight anymore is self-love. Feeling relief, even mixed with sadness, is self-love. And we don't talk about that enough. We don't talk about the icky feelings that we have to sit with and accept as a part of reality. We certainly don't talk enough about acceptance. Here's the thing I really want you to know, and maybe you're already doing this. I think a lot of women are walking around believing they're not loving themselves enough when in reality, they might be doing it every single day. So, some of the things that you might be doing that are actually very loving, like setting boundaries, having uncomfortable conversations, learning to be on your own, rebuilding your life, questioning old patterns, all of those things are self-love. It's not just the pretty version. So if you've had a day where you've set some really healthy boundaries with some very toxic people in your life, for example, and you want to go and celebrate that with a glass of wine with a girlfriend, well, that's self-love on steroids, I guess. There is nothing wrong with that. But the real crux of self-love, the stuff that really makes a difference are the things that I'm talking about today. Going for a massage or a manicure, like I said, it feels good in the moment, but it doesn't last. It doesn't heal you. It doesn't change anything. It just feels good in the moment. And those things are nice. They're distracting, and it can be a fun thing to do with friends, and we need our friends. But true self-love is about doing the tough work for yourself. It's about saying, I love myself enough that I'm going to do this really hard work. I'm going to set the boundaries, have the uncomfortable conversations, and so on. I mentioned earlier that sometimes we don't realize that we are already practicing self-love. We're already doing a lot of those really hard things, but we don't realize it's self-love because it feels so hard and it feels so uncomfortable. It goes against everything you were taught sometimes. You were taught to keep the peace, to make things work, to not be outspoken, to not make it about yourself, to think about everyone else first. So when you start choosing yourself, it can feel wrong. But wrong doesn't mean that it is, or feeling wrong doesn't mean that it is. It usually just means that it's new. You're doing something that is new, and your internal guidance system is going, whoa, we've never done this before. And yes, setting boundaries, especially with someone you're close to, can feel really hard. And I'm not just talking about your ex here. You might need to set boundaries around adult children, with your family, with a friend perhaps who's stepping over the line on some things. Boundaries is probably one of the first really big steps that we can take that is a truly loving act toward ourselves. Because when we set a boundary, as uncomfortable as it may be, we are essentially saying, I love myself enough to do something uncomfortable and ask you to please don't talk to me in that way or treat me in that way, because it really hurts me and I need to take care of myself. Do you hear that that's an act of love? that you love yourself enough to do the uncomfortable thing. Think about it when it comes to, for example, your children, if you have some. If your child is being hurt, it probably wouldn't bother you that much to go and call up the parents and say, look, we need to have a conversation about how your child is hurting mine. That's an uncomfortable conversation, but one you're very willing to have. You'll fight for your kids. But why won't you fight for yourself? That's really the question. What are you willing to do to stand up for yourself? Because you know what? No one else is going to. Often the person that we used to count on to stand up for us, which could have been your mom or your dad back when you were a child, or your spouse when you were married, they're not doing that anymore, if they ever did. It is up to you to do it. And that's not sad, and that's not pathetic. It doesn't mean that you have no one. What it means is that you have you. And if you can't even count on yourself to stand up for yourself, to take care of yourself, how can you possibly expect anyone else to? They won't even know how. You have to show them. You have to show them what you will and will not stand for, what you will and will not tolerate, how you will express when you are not happy. And then they feel that they can express the same in the same respectful, kind, and compassionate way. Now, this doesn't mean that softer things don't matter. Rest matters, joy matters, feeling good matters. There's lots of self-care that feels really, really good and is impactful. One of them that I really, really believe in is journaling. Why is that an act of self-care, or self-love rather? You might think of it more as self-care. Well, self-care is something we do because we love ourselves. Journaling is something that takes time, which is a pretty precious commodity these days, and something that we're often not willing to give ourselves. So, in my opinion, giving yourself the time to sit down with a journal and explore your inner world and write about it on a piece of paper or in a book, that's an act of self-love. You are giving yourself time. You are allowing yourself to listen to what you need. You are validating and witnessing your feelings by writing them down in your journal. When you start to think about the things that you choose to do for self-care and self-love, or out of self-love, think about if this has impact. If you feel like you're low on the self-love barometer, ask yourself what you can do to love yourself this weekend, for example. You might say like, okay, fine, Elizabeth, I will step up on the self-love department. But what will you do? Ask yourself, what is the most loving thing I can do for myself this weekend? Is it having a tough conversation with someone? You know what? Maybe that just feels so big and so hard that you can't overcome it right now. And that's okay. It might just be the one thing you can't manage on top of everything else you're dealing with. That's fine. Maybe you can go and buy yourself a pretty journal. And just very quickly, you could buy yourself the Joy Journal, which will guide you through this whole process. That is a journal that I created a couple of years ago for women who are going through this and anything else in life, or who simply want to embrace a daily journaling practice. And that link will be in your show notes. But I'm not here to talk about that. The thing is, you're going to take the time to write about your feelings and your inner world into a journal. You maybe go and buy yourself a really pretty journal. Maybe you make a half a day of it. Maybe you go to some local shops or drive yourself to a quaint little part of town, and you walk into a bookstore or one of those paper stores, you know what I mean, and you buy yourself a really pretty journal. Or you go on Amazon and order yourself the Joy Journal, whichever. Maybe you buy yourself a really nice pen and some really special new tea, and maybe even a little tea mug that's really pretty. All in all, you could probably do this for less than $30. And then you go home and you sit down with maybe some quiet music on in front of your window, and you put a blanket on you, you make yourself a cup of tea, you pull out your journal, and you start writing. When I describe that to you, doesn't that feel nice? Doesn't that feel a bit like loving yourself just a little bit, or a lot rather? These are some really beautiful ways that we can support ourselves, love ourselves, choose to do things that nurture our healing. That is why things like getting a good night's sleep is a really important part of our self-care. Reaching towards joy is loving. Saying to yourself, I deserve to feel joyful and happy again. And I'm going to do things to do that, like towards that. I'm going to participate in or choose to do activities or healing activities or even hard things because I know joy is at the end of this road. I know that I'm going to be closer to joy if I do that. Or maybe you'll even feel joy in the act of doing something. How can joy not be loving, right? The deeper piece that I want you to be aware of is self-abandonment. And rather, the opposite of that is that you are deciding that you're no longer willing to abandon yourself. You're no longer willing to ignore the things that you need, to ignore your own inner peace, happiness, well-being, and joy. You've decided that how you feel in this world and how you show up for yourself in this world matters more than just about anything else. And self-love, it's not about becoming someone new. It's about returning to yourself. And that process, it's not always peaceful. As I've outlined, it can be messy and it can feel very lonely. And sometimes it can feel really quiet. But it's real. It's all happening. Even when our world goes kind of quiet, maybe we don't talk to our friends for a few days or a week just because we feel like we need that space, the quiet. Maybe we find ourselves during those quiet times feeling sorry for ourselves because we feel lonely, or maybe we're wondering, are we truly alone in this world? Does anyone even care? Well, of course people care. They love you, they miss you, and they want the best for you. But they're also going to let you have the space that you need to take care of yourself. And that's what matters. Another thing that I think is important to recognize is that where we do this self-care, the environment that we're choosing to do self-care in matters more than we think. If you are currently still living with your soon-to-be ex, it would feel really difficult to create a space at home where you can truly do some of this work I've talked about today. Maybe you have an opportunity to borrow or to go and use a friend's vacation house for a couple of days, or maybe somebody's going away on vacation and you can go and hang out in their house for the weekend. Maybe there's opportunities like that for you to find a peaceful place to do some of this work. And this is where many of my clients choose to step into a retreat. They choose to come to one of the Rising Moon Sisters retreats because it's a place, or a space rather, that actually supports them. Here, you don't have to explain yourself. You're surrounded by women who get it. You can actually hear yourself think again and feel what's going on in your body and in your heart. And that's a really big part of these retreats and why they're so healing and transformational. One of the first things I hear from women when they've actually booked it is excitement, and I can't believe I did that. And my response is usually the same, and it comes from my heart, is you just did something incredibly loving for yourself. You chose to love yourself and do something for yourself. The thing is, one of the resistance, or the objections rather, that women have to booking into these retreats is that it feels selfish. Where do I get off spending that kind of money or taking that kind of time on me when, my kids are going through this as well? My friend, where do you get off? It's the least you deserve. Why is it that we as women think, and especially as mothers, think that we're not entitled to some fun, some peace, some space, some healing, some transformation? Why is it that we think that taking ourselves somewhere beautiful, where we're going to be supported, where we are going to feel safe, where we can be among others who will hold us while we go through this, why is it that we think that is such an act of selfishness? It's an act of love. Love towards yourself. And what do you think will happen with all that love when you go home? Well, you'll just be pouring it onto everybody else because you will go home a different person. You know, at these retreats, we don't sit and talk about the despair or the things that hurt or the things that happened. We talk about love. We talk about how to love life again and love ourselves and how to create more love in our life in whatever way that is. It's not about escaping your life. It's not about pretending like that isn't happening. It's about reconnecting with yourself in a way that is really hard to do when you're in the middle of everything at home. So if something in you has been craving that, craving some space or clarity or connection or all of those things, I would listen to that if I were you. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just need to be willing to take one step toward yourself. I'll leave all the details in the show notes, of course, so you can explore the different things that are coming up. But for now, maybe just start by noticing what you're already doing. Maybe you're already doing some of the things or all of the things that I've mentioned here. And remember, self-love is not something we do once and we're all set. It's ongoing. It is a practice that we continue throughout our lives, and it starts now. It's the hard things, it's the honest moments, and it's the ways that you're choosing yourself, even when it's uncomfortable. Yeah, like choosing to go on a retreat to a country you've never been to, with a group of women you've never gone away with or even met in person before. It counts a lot more than you think. Thank you for being here with me today and for taking this time. And thank you for letting me be in your headset today. I appreciate you so much and I'm so grateful. And I want you to know that listening to this episode was also an act of love to yourself. It was a choice that you made to spend some time learning about self-love. So I would love to hear what you found the most helpful or moving today. What was one thing that you took away from this episode that you're going to start or plan or whatever? I would really love to hear that. And you know who else would love to hear that? A woman who's just started this journey, who's behind you on this path. She needs to hear from women like you that this is helping. So whether you share this episode in your social media or you share your feelings about it inside our Facebook group, or you leave a review here on the podcast, please do that so that it can reach that woman who's just getting started, who really needs to hear this episode. Well, my friend, I will talk to you again next week. And thank you for being here. I wish you a beautiful day.